So Mike Widener has served as the rare book librarian at the Lillian Goldman Law Library at the Yale School of Law for 15 years until his retirement last year. He previously spent 15 years as head of special collections at the Tarleton Law Library at the University of Texas at Austin. Now Mike is the U.S. advisor for Bibliopathos, a rare book dealer based in Verona, Italy. And today we will learn more about his career journey, and Mike will highlight career options in the field, training opportunities, and his experience as a member of library search committees. Throughout this conversation, please type your questions and comments into the chat, and we will answer them during the Q&A portion at the end. So please welcome Mike Widener to the College of Information, and I'll hand it over to you, Mike.
Great. Thanks so much, Sandy, for that introduction. Thanks also to Lisa Hollinger and Adam Chavez for organizing this event. It's been really wonderful. And a shout out to Sarah Ryan, who is my colleague at the Yale Law Library and also a student in my Rare Book School class a few years ago. So thanks for all of you. Just a little more background. I'm a 6th generation Texan. And so it's great to be back in Texas, even if it's just virtually. So thanks again. Just one quick caveat. My experience, as you can see, has been in academic law libraries. I'll try and talk a little bit about work in similar sorts of institutions. I'm still very much a novice in the rare book trade, although I've been a customer of theirs for many years now. So I'm just going to talk about, just like we said, the joys and challenges, and try and focus a little bit more on the challenges, because I think that'll be more useful information to you as you go forward in your careers. The first joy is just being able to work with the raw materials of history. That's what really drew me to this field. I was a history nerd for a long time. I just devoured history books. And my previous career was in journalism. I was in broadcast journalism for a few years in Laredo. Then I worked as an editor at a state agency in Austin. And that's when I met my wife, Emma, who's actually the reason I became a librarian. She had been a librarian. She had went to the library school at UT in the 70s and went back and had a stellar career in Mexico City, where she's from, at the National University, and then as the librarian to the office of the President of Mexico. But she decided to come back to Austin to get an advanced degree, fortunately, because that's when we met. And when she was in grad school, she got a part-time job with Dorothy Sloan, who was a rare book dealer in Austin. She actually passed away just recently. And I remember in particular, Emma was helping to catalog some stuff that she brought home. And it was this big stack of documents from the late 16th century. They were the records of the Spanish Armada, the fleet that would come every year from Spain to the New World to leave off goods from Europe and pick up all the gold and silver from the mines. These were major undertakings, military and commercial endeavors. And it was fascinating. The paper was this beautiful paper, the handwriting and the contents. I mean, everything from the mundane, like, lists of what they were bringing to military intelligence. They were wondering, where is Sir Francis Drake? Is he going to pounce on us while we're here in the Caribbean? It was just fascinating stuff. And for that and other reasons, I decided to go to library school. And I really emphasized in archives at that point. And then got this job at the Tarleton Law Library, first off as archivist and rare book librarian. And I've maintained an interest in archives, but I started drifting over much more to the rare book side of the operation. But it's just the material, it's just great stuff to work with. I love the human aspect of it. These are things that are written by people. They come about human activity. I've just had some joys working with this material. It's just wonderful stuff. I've worked with medieval manuscripts, books, Italian books from the 17th and 18th century that I just think are just beautiful books. And you start appreciating these things much more, not just as historical sources, but as artifacts. These are things that people built. The paper is handmade, and the artifactual value aspect of these objects really contains a lot of information. And that's one of the challenges, is actually learning about the artifactual value of these and the stories that those tell, the stories that bindings tell, that the paper itself, the handwriting, the provenance of these items, all sorts of things. All these things tell stories. And part of the thing, excuse me, that you come to appreciate when you start working with these things is you have to understand not just an appreciation of them as they're interesting and cool objects, but as a librarian, how are you going to manage these things? How are you going to make them available? That means understanding the processes by which they were constructed, who built them, why they were built, why they were made, who used them, who they were intended for. All of these sorts of things tell all sorts of other different stories, provide evidence to help you understand them and appreciate them. So that's one of the challenges that I've had, is actually learning about these things, learning about printing processes, how paper is made. And modern things have their own challenges. Born digital is a whole nother thing that I haven't really dealt too much with, but it's an enormous challenge that a lot of you are going to be facing. So one of the things I did that helped me a lot was some of the courses that I took in library school. And I don't know if they still teach cataloging, but the cataloging course I took in library school has served me throughout. I mean, being able to understand how these things are made available in a catalog, in an online environment. Why do we have these rules? What do the rules do? And so forth. It's just been an invaluable course. The other course I took at the University of Texas was a course called Research Methods in American History. And there, what they taught was how to use different sources. It was one of the by far the most work I put into any course in library school. And it was actually intended partly for history PhD students who were writing their dissertation proposals. So we had 1 week where we studied photographs, maps, business records, personal diaries, all sorts of things like this. We had to write a paper every week on each one of these things and discuss these. And then at the end, we had to write basically a dissertation proposal, even though I wasn't doing a PhD in history. And that just taught me so much about how historians use materials, about how no one source stands on its own. It helped me to understand how historians and other people use these records as evidence and make use of them. So that was one of the things. It also, helped me to help me expand my, the other challenges, to expand your boundaries of what historical materials are. It's not just the old stuff. I've started collecting my last years at Yale, a lot of 20th century material. Again, the born digital stuff. I had to learn, for instance, how to love law books, because actually a lot of them, at first glance are pretty boring books. Let's be honest about that. But they actually end up telling lots of interesting stories. And that's something that when you get into this field, you may have to to learn to appreciate the materials you're working with, but there's always something in them that that you can learn to love. So that's one of the joys working with these materials. The next thing, the other joy, another joy I've had is sharing these materials. That's it's been great fun. I can't tell you how much fun I've had doing this. I've done a lot of tours. We do tours for entering law students, for instance. We did for entering law students, for new faculty, for visitors. I would do events for alumni events. We do an open house at Yale, and with no program, just a lot of interesting things that I would put out. They were conversation starters. It was just a lot of fun doing that. Teaching is also, there's a growing sense in the special collections field of the importance of these materials for teaching. I'm fond of saying, for one thing, you know, these materials have an impact. When you put the real objects in front of students, they have an impact that a PowerPoint will never, ever come close to. When you open a 16th century book, when the student gets to actually turn the pages, put them in their hands, it really has a profound impact. People relate to these in a way that a PowerPoint or something like that will never, ever do. And relating to that is a challenge that I've had of learning about teaching methods. How do you actually use these materials in a classroom? How do you get beyond just the typical show and tell? And I did some things at Yale that part of it is working with faculty, reaching out to them. There were often many years I would go through the course schedule, not just in the law school, but in the history department. I taught sessions for a class in art history once, just on book design. There's all sorts of things like that that are really fun, and you end up as a librarian learning lots from them too. But if you have a chance to learn about teaching methods using special collections, there's some activities that are going on now in some of the organizations that I really urge you to do it, because that really one of the things it does, it helps you justify your existence. You know, there's a tendency in times to look at special collections as kind of a luxury. And I've talked a lot recently about starting to look at these special collections as an investment in instructional technology. I think they're quite comparable in price and sometimes lower than what you spend on smart classrooms, and with a lot more impact and opportunities for students to actually learn, active learning. So that's one of the things that I really stress. I know when I began, I said a few times, as you know, this collection when I was at the University of Texas, this collection is not going to be a museum. And I've shifted a little bit from that. So now in some ways we are a museum, but the model I look to is children's museums. These hands-on museums where students and researchers actually get to use the stuff. So that's been great. Working with researchers too. I've worked with researchers from all over the world, really, doing all sorts of topics. Historians. I've worked with people, or somebody who was doing a play and wanted background on a certain trial that we had. Somebody who was writing a novel, and the character was a student who had been at Yale in the 30s. So the author researching wanted to know the backstory. How much was tuition? Where did the students live? All sorts of information like that I was able to help them. So you you get a lot of things, and I've learned a lot from researchers. And I encourage people to do this when they get into the field. I've interviewed researchers and asked them, why was this book useful to you? And most of the time, they're really happy to talk to you about it. And I ended up learning lots about the value of resources in my collections by talking with researchers and finding out what it was that drew them to that resource. So that's another thing, a habit that I encourage people to cultivate. I've done exhibitions, especially at Yale. Ended up doing a lot of exhibitions, which is another way of sharing. They're also excellent teaching tools. There are ways to look at certain aspects of the collection, and there are also ways of networking. Most of the exhibits I did with co-curators. Sometimes they were students. I reached out on some occasions to historians who were experts. I did an exhibition with a medievalist at the Yale faculty on the Pope as judge and lawgiver. I did exhibits, a couple of exhibits with rare book dealers. One with a book dealer in Austin, Michael Laird, a friend of mine, who's an expert in book bindings. And all we did was we did an exhibit, a really fun exhibit on the bindings of law books. Doing it with co-curators, a way to bring in people who know lots more about the topic. Michael Laird, for instance, knows way more about book bindings than I could ever learn if I spent 10 years studying it, in addition to everything else. So it creates partnerships. It's a way to raise the profile of the collection. These are all important things. One thing that's important in doing outreach, this is one of the challenges, is that it's so important to be involved with all the other things that are going on in your library. For instance, they would do orientation for new law students, and I wanted a place in the orientation, and it worked out great. Even though we would do kind of a speed dating sort of model where the students would go through a bunch of different stations. And the thing about the rare book collection, all the other stuff, almost all the other things were process oriented. How do you get your Westlaw passwords? How do you check out reserve a Carol? The rare book collection part of the program was one of the few things that had nothing to do with process. It was just something that was fun to look at. And, maybe 5% or fewer of those students would ever come back to the collection again. But that was good. And the ones that didn't, they still liked it. It was something that was, I did a similar thing with the alumni reunions at the University of Texas. I taught a 1-hour class on book collecting. And part of the deal with that, at these alumni reunions, they would have continuing legal education classes or a professor talking about his book. And my book collecting class was the one thing that was fun, that had nothing to do with getting ahead, was one thing that the spouses were interested in. They were bored to tears by all that other stuff. But this book collecting class, that was kind of a fun thing. So there's another thing, reaching out to your development people. If they were bringing people in, donors or alumni or things, I could offer them a fun thing to do that we weren't pressuring them for nothing, was just an interesting thing. And these materials are really fascinating material, and people love to get a chance to look at them. So that's another thing that you would do. As far as sharing with them also, here again comes in the whole aspect of knowing about cataloging and how cataloging is done. One of the ways you share these materials is in your online catalog. And there are times when you need to be able to work with the catalogers to make the material more accessible. It was really interesting. I always remember this. I had this one not a fight, but a ongoing debate with the catalogers about it's too complicated to get into, but there's rules that sometimes in cataloging produce results that are just perverse, is in my mind, for the user. But there are ways to work around those. And if you understand cataloging rules and how catalogers work, you're able to work with them and come up with a solution. But you got to be able to speak their language. You don't need to be an expert cataloger, but you need to understand what catalogers do. Because it's important, it really affects your ability to do your job. One of the other challenges with sharing now, just real quickly, is offsite storage. Out of sight, out of mind, and that's something that you're going to have to face up with. One of the classes I took at library school that helped me a lot with this, a class I took on information marketing. And we had to create an information marketing plan for a private and a public organization. And that class also helped me a lot. That was a really wonderful thing to do. So the other thing, the other joy that I had was collection building. Basically spending other people's money on these wonderful books and things. That is fun. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it. I think collecting really is an art form. I actually wrote an article, a tribute to a mentor of mine, talking about the art of book collecting. And it really is an art form, and it's so much fun to explore, to build on existing fields and look at new ones. I was able to do a number of really fun collections at the time I was there. At Texas, Tarleton, we had already had a good law dictionary collection, and I was able to build it to really one of the very best collections of law dictionaries in the United States. I built another collection totally different of law-related fine press books. Now, you wouldn't think that fine press books, they do a lot of literature and things, that there'd be much law. But I actually built a collection of about 300 of these, partly because of a donor, a guy who I actually bothered to listen to. He had been to the library, to the law school at UT in the 50s, and he was giving money in honor of his father, who had been a medicine professor, and at other institutions, and they weren't listening to him. They were taking the money and doing other stuff with it. But this guy collected fine press books. So I said, I wonder if there's any law-related ones. First off, I found a lot of them that we already had in the stacks, that people didn't appreciate them for what they are. And this is an opportunity that a lot of people, librarians, special collections librarians, even if you don't have a budget, there's probably a lot of stuff in your collection or outside in the stacks that people haven't looked at in the way that you're going to looking at. So you can actually build collections, new collections out of what you already have. That's a really fun thing to do. So I did that at Yale. We had my mentor, one of the great law librarians of the 20th century, Morris Cohen, the late great Morris Cohen. One of the reasons I went to took the job at Yale was to work near him. He was retired by that, but he and his son had built a collection of law-related children's books. And again, you wouldn't think that there's be a lot, but there actually he had, and his son had built a wonderful collection of about 300 items. And he asked me, will you add to it? I said, you bet. And I've started. It's fun to do because there's no list to go by. You have to go and find this stuff. You have to work with book dealers. Some of them don't really get the idea of what you're doing, but you find some that do. And that was just a really fun collection to do. Again, a collection where a lot of those things, I spent $5, $10 an item. They weren't expensive, but they were valuable to us because of what they, how they interacted with the other items in the collection. So, so those are some things. The challenges in collection building. Money is one of the challenges, especially for smaller institutions. And here again, that's why it's important to take fresh looks at what you already have. You can do this with exhibitions, which is kind of another way of collection building in some ways. You're building a small collection that tells a story about a topic. And that brings up the whole idea of storytelling, because collection building is in some way storytelling, and so is doing exhibits. There's a wonderful piece by a library school professor at Illinois, D.W. Crummell, who did a wonderful short piece about exhibitions. And he said, if you want to learn how to do good exhibitions in library school, the course you ought to take is the storytelling course for children's literature. So, and he was serious about that, and he's right. It's storytelling. You know, you have to speak to a broad audience. You can't, people aren't going to read reams of text in an exhibit case. And you have to tell a story with a beginning and an end and a trajectory. So that is fun to do. That is fun to do, but that's something you need to learn with. Also with, again, with collection building is learning to, is being involved with your libraries. What else is going on in your library? I hate the idea of special collections being an island unto themselves. You're part of a broader collection. And one of the things you need to know, for instance, like when are they doing shifts? You ought to go look at the stuff that they're shifting, the stuff that they're thinking about sending to offsite storage. And if you're not in the loop on what's going on in the library as a whole, you're missing out on some opportunities. Also, the whole thing in collection building is getting beyond the idea of trophy hunting. And there's a lot of new material, you know, look at what you're, one of the blinds, and this is a blind spot for a lot of collections, especially in academic institutions, libraries. One of their big blind spots, they don't collect the material that they produce themselves. I'm talking about the bookmarks, the reader's guides, all of that sort of stuff. And it's stuff that is important to document the history of your own library. And if you don't pick it up when it's done and catalog it, like you catalog a book, that stuff is gone. So that's one of the things I really urge people to think about. You know, your own annual reports, they're being cataloged, you know, so, and I heard a comment at a recent conference that really illustrates this. There's a rare book dealer named Lauren Baer in Winchester, Virginia, who specializes in 20th century social movements. He talked about, he says, look, if you want to buy a first edition of Sir Isaac Newton's Principia, which is a very, very expensive book, a highlight, one of the great landmarks in the history of science. As long as you've got deep pockets, got, you know, six-figure, can afford a six-figure price tag and patience, there'll be one that'll come up 2 or 3 times in a decade. You can get it if you've got the money and the patience. But he said he put together a collection of hobo literature from the time of the Depression. And he said one of those that he put together for an institution, one of the books in there was an autobiography by a female hobo. And he said, I guarantee you, I will never, ever see that book again. So there's some things there that some opportunities, things that right now aren't that expensive, but are really, if you want to talk about rarity, look at some stuff and stuff with real research value, like that autobiography. Digital is having as a challenge for that also. You know, why collect things that are already online? Oftentimes, one of the reasons is they're not really duplicates. You've got the same book, but with these wonderful annotations, the story of who owned it and so forth. And looking at, again, at special collections as an institutional asset for attracting faculty, for documenting it. In the case of archives, for documenting the history of the institution itself. These bookmarks and things like that that we kind of look at as kind of, well, they're, oh, they're all over the place. We don't have to collect them. In 10 years, you won't be able to find them. And for things like anniversaries, centennials and things like that, these things down the road will become incredibly valuable and evocative. And again, the whole idea of born digital is another challenging area in terms of that. Working with donors also, and working with collectors. So I'm going to leave, just tell real quickly, one of the other joys is networking in professional associations with your colleagues at other institutions, networking with collectors and researchers, and so forth. The challenges there are funding and sometimes and just sheer time. And the other joy has just been, this is a type of work where you're always learning. So, and that's been incredible fun. So I want to first show you a few sources that might be useful. I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to close out talking about job searching, which I know is so. Shift there. So here's some things, some organizations that are great for networking. And especially if you're looking for a job, these are great opportunities to network. The Bibliographical Society of America is one. Their dues are only $35 for emerging bibliographers under the age of 35. The Society of Southwest Archivists for archivists. I've been a member of SSA for almost 30 years now. It's a great organization. They do great meetings. It's one of the bargains in professional associations. Dues for students are only $15 a year, and it's an opportunity to get involved. These are all these different organizations. Don't just pay the dues, go to the meetings, get on a committee. This is a way to get yourself known in the profession, which is hugely valuable when you start looking for a job. If you've done work on a committee, there's a work product there, somebody who's in the profession that actually writes you a real reference. SSA also is a very unpretentious organization. The annual meetings are fun. They have great parties and really excellent programs. So I'll mention that. As a source of training, Rare Book School, where I teach a course called Law Books, History and Connoisseurship. But the courses are expensive. They're about $1,300 a year for a 1-week course. They're taught generally in the summer. Not just in Charlottesville, but in Virginia, but in other places too. There's a wide variety of courses on archives, on bookbinding, bibliography, on and on and on. The other thing you can do, take a look at these even if you can't take the course, you can take a look at the description here, and they give you the advanced reading list. Again, things that you'll be able to learn some stuff without taking the course. My course also has some of that. So that's one. Philo Biblos is a blog that's great for every week. He puts out one post with links to goings on online in the special collections field, also in upcoming auctions. I love the design because it's very brief and to the point. In 30 seconds, I can look at this every week and say if there's anything there that interests me or not, which is actually a model for what you might want to think about doing when sort of things that you do for current awareness when you're in the profession. For YouTube, if you want to learn about the rare book field, this guy, Adam Weinberger, Rare Book Buyer, does some wonderful videos. The guy the videos will last anywhere from 30 seconds to 20 minutes. He's a lot of fun. He has a great sense of humor, but you can learn a lot. There's a bunch of videos here. I'll tell you one thing about this guy. He's a rare book dealer in New York. I always go to the New York Antiquarian Book Fair, the leading fair. And a friend of mine, a book dealer for a long time, told me, there's book dealers from all over the world there, great experts. And he says, that guy, speaking of Adam Weinberger, he's the smartest guy in the whole room. Great, highly recommended. Rare Book Hub is another place to learn about it. They sell subscriptions to databases for book transaction history, but they have a free newsletter that you can sign up for that gives you news about the rare book and special collections field. There's a lot of social media stuff. This is just one example. We Love End Papers, this Facebook group on about end papers, a lovely thing. It's a lot of eye candy. It's one of the places on Facebook where there's no trolls. It's just a great, and there's lots of other sources like this. Fine Books and Collections magazine, you can subscribe to it, but they also have a free newsletter you can subscribe to. One of the things in particular I'll point out, just as far as paternal pride, they have a series on their blog on bright young librarians. This is my son, Henry, who's no longer at Catholic University. He's now at the Library of Congress. But there's a whole series here about bright young librarians like y'all are going to be, how they got into the field, things about their collection. It's a great little series. So I will stop sharing there. And I want to talk a little bit in the 6 minutes I have left about job searching. Beforehand, one thing to do is to look for opportunities. There's lots of different institutions to work in, not just libraries, academic and special libraries. There's museums, historical societies. I would not overlook the rare book trade also. There's some great opportunities there working in the rare book trade. You'll get your hands on lots of books. A lot of these dealers are really world-renowned experts in their field. Even the low-level ones, go to the book and paper shows in your area. I know there's one in the Dallas area. Those are all opportunities. Preparing, do some internships. And it's great if you can do an internship where you produce some sort of a product, something that you can put your name on, so that when you're applying for a job, you can say, here's something that I actually did. It might be a digital project, I don't know, but if that's possible, even if it's just working as a book monitor or at the circulation desk at a library, learn about what's going on in the library. What are people checking out? Why do they do things this way or that way? Don't just look at it as a drudge job. Milk it for all you've got and talk with people. Quick thing about additional degrees. They can be very handy. Some special collections require them. It's kind of a tough thing because it's expensive. And you've got to look at the economics of spending more time in grad school versus the salary you're going to get when you get out. But like I said before, getting involved in professional associations, it gets you to know people in the profession that know you. And one thing that in hiring, it's always kind of a roll of the dice. People always want to hire people that either they know or somebody they know knows, because who knows, you can end up, it's a risky thing. You can end up hiring somebody who's a total jerk and now you can't get rid of them. So that's something that's on hiring committees' mind. Writing skills, learn to be a good writer. Grammatical errors and punctuation things on CVs and in cover letters are red flags. So be careful with that. When you apply for a job, do your research on the place. I would go to, when I was applying at Yale, I went to their website. I looked through every corner of that website. I looked at the catalog. I looked at all the endowed funds that the library had and what they were used for. On CVs, and you should tweak it every time based on the job that you're applying for. You can emphasize some things more than others depending on what you're applying for. You should always do that. When you do a cover letter, when I did a cover letter, I use the job description and requirements as an outline. And don't waste a lot of time. Oh, this would be so great to work at your wonderful institution. And that's kind of puffery. I mean, you need to communicate. You're eager to work there and you appreciate what they do, but don't waste a lot of time on that. Also, watch the page limit. I was on a search committee where this guy put this letter, says, I know you said 2 pages, but let me go on. And what I said was, you know what? No, that guy was off the list. Search committees are looking for ways to whittle down the pack to people that to make things simpler. And interviews and job talks for PowerPoints, please don't do a PowerPoint that's nothing but an outline of your talk. That's boring. People can read already. I mean, that's just make it fun and make it to the point. Make it punchy. Use pictures, but don't give people a lot of stuff to read on the screen. That's just a turnoff. When you're interviewing, leave time for questions. Some people will go on, and then it turns out a couple of the people that are on the search committee didn't have a chance to ask their own questions, and they remember that. Do ask questions. We would always left time at the end when I was on search committees. We would ask the candidate, do you have any questions for us? There were a couple of times I said, no, we don't have any questions. And that for me was a black mark. I said, that person is out. They had no curiosity about what we were doing, about what, but there's always good questions to ask. I saw on the website that you're doing this program on this and that. Why did you, what was the reasoning behind that? Show some curiosity about what's going on there. Don't pander to people. And one last thing, because now's my time, I'll talk about one of the disasters I saw in hiring. When they were looking for a replacement for me at Tarleton, we had a guy who was working in another special collection. I respected him. He had good experience. So he came in the morning for a day's worth of interviews. He was dressed nice, didn't wear a tie. And the library director wanted me to bring him in first just to talk briefly. So I said, yeah. And so they talked, they had a pleasant conversation. The director asked him, why do you want to work here? He says, well, I never finished my PhD at UT, and this would be a great chance to finish it up. So he said, okay, thanks. Mike, stay behind. And the guy went out, and my director told me that guy will never, ever work in this library. First, he didn't wear a tie, which was a real turnoff for my boss. And the reason he wanted to work there was to finish his PhD. My boss didn't care about the PhD. He wanted to know why he wanted to work for us. So that's it. I'll cut off here. I'm eager to hear your questions.
Thank you so much, Mike. This has been a really exciting and interesting conversation. We have an active and lively chat happening at the moment, so I'll review some of the questions for you in just a second. And I will say, if you're not looking at the chat, not you specifically, but anybody in this group, we did put out the feeler for anybody that would like to share their LinkedIn profile as a form of networking with other participants in this conversation. Feel free to include it in the chat so that we can all connect with one another and begin networking our way to a career like yours, hopefully. So first question is from Caitlin, and you may have answered a portion of this a minute ago, but we'll go ahead and ask it again. So Caitlin asks, how do you get your foot in the door into starting a career in rare books and special collections, especially if you're training to become an archivist?
Well, internships are a great way. Internships and professional associations are two great ways. Sometimes you can do some of your classwork. For instance, if you're training to be if you're processing a collection for a grade as a class project, that is a great way to get in. Volunteering at there's a lot of smaller historical societies that are underfunded. They need volunteers. That's another way to do it. Those are two things I can think of right off the bat.
And for students who might not be well-versed in networking or reaching out to people to get those internships, how do you suggest they go about even finding them or finding those nonprofits, for example, that may need some help?
That's a good question. There's no real ready answers to that. Just start looking around people that are organizations that are doing the type of thing that you're interested in. Sometimes it may be an organization for an interest that you have. Maybe they have an archive, their records that need to be organized. That's one way of doing it. Sometimes it's, some people advertise opportunities. Sometimes you can create them. Go in. I hear it. See, you've got this collection. What sort of things? Is there any opportunities there? So those are some ways to do that.
And
you got to look around.
One thing you mentioned a while ago was the opportunities for mentorship. And I will say that one thing my mentor taught me is the power of just asking. And so this might be another opportunity where students can ask their professors to help connect them for internships or to even find those collections that may need help, and or go directly to the people who own and organize these collections and just ask. Receiving a no is totally okay in this regard. Totally not an issue. And then Dr. Ryan, I see you're on here as well. If you have any other ideas or suggestions related to this topic, feel free to jump in. She may be trying to unmute herself. Yes, Adam, could we unmute?
Yes, let me turn that on right now. Okay, Dr. Ryan.
I'm going to connect something that Mike and Sandy said, put on a tie or a suit or whatever, dress like you're going for a job interview and just show up to the place where you might, the local Holocaust museum, the local art museum, the rare books. If you look in the chat right now, you've got an invitation to come by special collections at UNT. So, dress up, show up, look around, make small talk, and then just, drop your secret agenda. I'm here because I'm a student and I want to get into this field. Unless they have no bandwidth, they will either try to help you find a different opportunity, or they'll say, when can you start? I mean, that's been my experience. I've gotten a lot of when can you start?
Yeah.
I think that's great advice. And you might have more information related to the next question, Dr. Ryan, so feel free to jump in as well. So Mike, Stephen's asking, what was your first experience entering into the library field? And was it through your school, a public library, or some other route? And would you recommend others to enter the field the way you did, or were there actions you could have taken that would have made it better?
Well, I liked libraries when I was a teenager and a kid. I always liked books. And, partly, again, my wife really opened my eyes to this as not just as a career possibility, not just going in and using the material. So that was really the way that I got in. I was also at a point where I was burned out with what I was doing, And I'm really glad I did. This has been so much fun. But that's basically how I got into it. You know, I went to school and got the degree. I did do some internships. I did one writing the annual report for the Austin Community College libraries. I was also then a summer, like the substitute reference librarian for a few months. It was a temporary job in the summer. And Austin Community College, the libraries were really excellent. They were just top notch. And the library director at the campus I worked on was a great asset in getting my job at Tarleton. She had worked for Roy Mirsky, the director. When he called her for a reference, she actually waved her and says, "Come, come, come." And I listened there while she gave me this really glowing reference, you know, partly because I'd done a good job for them, you know. It was, so that's basically how I got in.
Okay, and then another question from Perla. Have you always wanted to work with rare books or special collections, or is there a specific moment when you realized this was the field you wanted to pursue?
After my marriage, my wife, and you know, she worked for this rare book dealer, Dorothy Sloan. I didn't really know that, wasn't really aware of rare book dealers anyway. I actually bought a couple of books from Dorothy because I was very interested in Mexican colonial architecture, and she put out a catalog of a historian's library of this stuff. So I actually bought some things, and Emma had worked actually before as a book agent in Mexico City. So you know, really Emma, my wife, really opened my eyes to this as an opportunity. I'm so glad I did.
That's wonderful. And it looks like Morgan posted in the chat that if you enjoyed today's talk, you are invited to join us to look at the medieval manuscript fragments in the UNT special collections. And she's included a link to the event, which is on March 28th at 2 p.m.
That would be great. There's a whole fragmentology, it's called. It's this booming field now. And there's also some groups on Facebook and Instagram dealing with this. It's a fascinating field. I know a number of people that are involved. We actually did an entire exhibit on that at Yale. And it was one of the most successful exhibits we did. So please, you take advantage of that. I'd love, if I was there, I'd go.
Oh, no, I believe it's online. Let me look real quick. No, it might be in person. I will find out more.
It's going to be,
share.
I'm sorry, this is Morgan. It's going to be an in-person program, but it's also going to be on Zoom. So there's a Zoom link in the Facebook invitation.
So Mike, we will make sure to share this with you after the talk so that you can attend by Zoom.
Absolutely.
That's really exciting. So we're running at the end of our time together. If anybody else has the last minute question, we could probably take one more. And while I'm fielding the chat, Mike, if students or colleagues would like to connect with you, what is a good way for them to reach you?
Adam has, and I think Lisa also have my email address. There's actually maybe the placement officer there. I actually know of an opening that's coming for the job my son left to go to the Library of Congress. And I'd be happy to talk with him about that.
Wonderful. Okay. So your email, Adam posted it in the chat. So if you are interested in connecting with Mike, please reach out to him by email. And he also actually knows of an opening. So there's that opportunity. And I'm scrolling back up to look for a question from Lisa. And Lisa, if you'd rather, you can just ask it. I don't know if I see it.
Yes, I can just ask it directly. And it's kind of a whimsical question, but I know we have a tiny a tiny book exhibit at the UNT library. And I know that there are some librarians that have their favorites. I wondered if you have a favorite rare book that you've worked with or collected for.
God.
Are there too many?
There's lots of them. I got very fond of Italian books. There's these Italian books from the 16th, 17th, 18th century that have what are called limp paper bindings. They're very thick paper. They're very plain. These weren't fancy bindings, but they developed this patina that's almost like velvet. And the way they open, the way a book ought to open, they're just, they're beautiful. There's, God, I don't know I wouldn't know where to begin. Annotate. I bought an annotated book of canon law that is crammed full. The guy filled not just the margins, but some openings. There's 6, 7, 8, 12 slips of paper pasted in. It was like somebody was insane. Actually, it turns out we think they were a professor's lecture notes from the early 18th century. Oh God, there was just so many just beautiful books. People can go to my the Flickr site for the Yale Law Library. Just search Google for Yale Law Library Flickr, Flickr, and there's about almost 9,000 images there. Almost all of them were things that I scanned from our books. And there's an albums tab where you can actually browse through. I organized them to 140 different albums. There's things there on topical areas. There's things on trials, on African-American history, different books. There's albums on woodcut initials, on all sorts of things. The headpieces, like the one behind me from a German law book from 1809, just beautiful little, I got obsessed with these things. And you can see the fruits of my obsession there on the Flickr site. It's a great way to learn about books also. So that I'll throw that out also.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Mike, and for all of those who've joined us in our lively chat. This has been a really wonderful learning experience and a great way for students and faculty and colleagues to network and have a conversation about some of these topics. And I feel like we could talk probably all day about several of these.
Yeah, sure.
So we will connect with you. We've shared your email in the chat. And if anybody has any questions, of course, you can reach out to us on the College of Information website. Otherwise, thank you for your time. And it looks like Dr. Kinshuk just popped in. Were you wanting to say hello?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was fantastic, speech, and I really enjoyed. I just kept on the background because I was just wanted to be as a learner. But my name is Kinshuk. I'm Dean of the college, and I really appreciate you giving your time. Thank you.
Sure. This is fun. Thank you. I want to thank you all once again, all the people that organized this, you attended. It's been a lot of fun. And good luck to all of you. And thanks for having me.